It was November 4th, 2025, and I went to Monday Coffee to play some chess, courtesy of Chess Coffee Chicago. In that room, there was one man that, in my opinion, is the highest rated chess player in that room, and his name was Peso. Peso has beaten me numerous times and has gone unbeaten in some cases for a while at Chess Coffee Chicago. I've only beaten him once. There is a lot of games where he has won from straightforward wins all the way to humiliating wins against me. And in this game, this will be my second time winning against Peso in a game that I could have won sooner. So, grab anything that you need to analyze this game with, and let's begin. Now, in this game right here, I played as black and Peso played as white. The game starts off with e4 and then c6, the Caro-Kann, followed with moves d4, d5, knight to c3, knight to g6, pawn moves forward to e5, and I made a very critical mistake, a rookie mistake, one you can learn from me. I moved my bishop that was on c8 to g4. Critical mistake. However, Peso didn't see that, so he just moved his bishop to e2. I take his bishop, he takes my bishop with his knight, and now we are left in this position. But let's fast forward to sequence 22. And now we're in this position. The pawn takes on c5. The bishop takes back. And now Peso decides to take one of my weak pawns that is right here on h6. Bishop to h6. And then I said, that's fine. Because now I move my knight to c5. Which in the computer it indicated that it was a great move, but it was not to my knowledge. Peso now moves his queen to e2. And in my mind I said, why not sacrifice the knight? I want to do it. So I sacrificed the knight. d4, attacking his queen. And then Peso saw that he can check my king. So then he moves all the way, not taking my knight, but moves all the way to check my king on a6, and I move to b8. My king was safe, and the queen had nowhere to check my king. Now in this position right here, it was white's turn to move. And Peso moved his king to h1. And I was stunned. And I was really excited and nervous. My body was shaking because I saw a move that I deemed was possible, which was rook takes the knight on g6. And the computer read it as a brilliant move. I played a brilliant move against one of the toughest players at Chess Coffee Chicago. But I didn't know that. When I did make that move, it felt really great. So then, pawn takes. And then, in this position right here, I wanted to ignore the threat the pawn was making to my queen and just simply move my rook to h8. And if the pawn took, this was mate in 2. But I didn't see it. Before even making that move, I was full of nervousness, excitement, jittering. My hands were shaking, my legs were shaking. My head was rushing with a lot of sequences of what to do, of the possibilities of the moves that I can do. My heart was pounding. Man, I felt like Edgar Allan Poe. But I wanted to play it safe. And I moved my queen to g6, eliminating that threat that the pawn was making to my queen. Bishop moves back to threaten my knight. And now we are left in this position. I was completely winning against Peso. I just didn't know that. Because in my experience, when you're playing against skilled players and respectable players that have beaten you time and time again, you think that they may have something up their sleeves. I just didn't know that I was winning completely. I was at ease, but I was still thinking about my rook on d8 and the sacrifice I could have made towards my queen. Instead, that was non-existent. And then the game goes on. Now, at one point, the game was equal. White's a move. Rook takes on d2. Pawn takes d2. And that pawn right there was what made the game equal. I had lost all my advantage. King takes the pawn, and the game was equal. He had a rook and a queen, I had a knight and a queen, and I thought it was over. So then the sequence follows. I moved my knight to e4. He plays e3. I decided that I wanted to move my queen here to g5, and he plays a very good move here, which was d4. Then I thought queen to d2. The queen saves the day by going in front of the king, protecting it. And then I thought, that's fine. I'll move my queen to b2 because the knight is protecting this square and the queen can't go on this square. He makes another great move, which was e3. What followed was numerous great moves by Peso on his behalf. So then I thought, okay, let's just take the pawn that is free. And then he goes to check my king, and I simply moved to b7. Queen goes back right here to d4, trying to exchange the queens, but I didn't want to do that just yet. So then I moved my queen to g3. Then he finds another great move, which was rook to f3. And I simply felt like my win was slipping away. And then I moved my queen to e1. He makes another great move, which was f4. And then I checked. He moves back. I check again, and he moves back. But I didn't want to repeat the position because I refused to draw. I came all the way this far. I have more pawns than him on the board. I know that I can win this. So then I decided to move my knight to d2, threatening the rook, and he makes a mistake, which was rook to f2. This wins the rook. How? The pawn. The pawn checks the king and the queen together. This queen is protecting the pawn. The king cannot take. So the queen is forced off this diagonal that was protecting the rook. And now, queen takes the rook that was on f2 check. King moves to g5. I decided to move my knight to e4. He moves back. Then I check. Queen to g3. And then he takes that pawn with his king that was on f5. And I said, now is the time to trade my queens. Or to trade the queens off the board, excuse me. Boom. Saving my knight. e5, queen to e5 check. King takes on e5. And now I decided to just simply move away. But then, king moves to f4, threatening my knight. He wanted this knight off the board, because then he could promote this g2 pawn all the way down to a queen, or to a rook, or to whatever his liking was. Then I moved away. But he moves closer, trying to find the right square so that my knight could be off the board, but then I move. And now, this is where he brings his pawn all the way down to g4. I was nervous because I had not played a knight endgame like this at all, with a pawn so far in that position and threatening to queen. So then I thought in the game I needed to connect my king and my knight, so that way the knight cannot be taken off the board. So then I move to c6. Now remember in the game when I played the Caro-Kann? That was a critical move. Now the king moves here on f6 to attack my knight. I move away to e8. Then he moves closer to e7. And I make a very huge mistake, which was knight to g7. If he had found this one move, if he had found this move, f7, my knight would have been trapped. I would have nowhere to go. The pawn was perfectly placed. But he didn't find that. Instead, he moved the pawn to g5. My knight had 2 squares to go. So then I moved my king to d5, trying to see if I could still connect my knight and king together. And he's commanding with this pawn because he moved it to g6. And then I made a very waiting move, I guess you can say. And I moved my pawn to b5, just trying to see where he would move. And at last, he moves his king to f7, threatening my knight once again. And then I thought, this is a time where I should move my knight. So I moved my knight to f5. He moves his king to f6, threatening to take my knight off the board. And finally, king to e4, connecting my king and my knight, blocking and protecting this square, because if he dared move that pawn forward, I would have sacrificed my knight and that pawn would have been gone and my knight would have been gone and I would have taken care of this pawn as well. Of course, he saw that. So then he moved his king to e6. And at this point, I didn't know which move was right. By that I meant which pawn I should move. And then I figured I need these 2 pawns to work as a team to take down this pawn or to move past it. So then I moved my pawn to a5. The computer read is a great move. King tries to see if he could take those pawns out, moves to d7, and I just kept marching. b4. King moves to c6, getting closer and closer to my pawns. And at this point, I was debating which pawn to move because I did not want to lose both of these pawns. Had I moved this pawn here, pawn could have taken. If I moved here, this could have been a losing game for me. But that didn't happen in the game. Instead, I moved my pawn to a4. Another great move. And by the time he got closer, now I moved my b pawn to b3. And this is where Peso resigned. Because it was too late. Had he taken this pawn, I could have had the decision to either take his pawn and move forward to convert it to a queen checking him and find the winning endgame there. Or if he had taken this pawn, I could have simply just moved forward. And now that's a passed pawn. Peso resigned right here. And at the end of the day, I could have won sooner. On sequence 26, I could have easily just moved my rook that was on d8 to h8, pinning this bishop that was on h6 while the king was here, and that would have been made in 2. And in the end, me and Peso decided to discuss about the game afterwards, about the possible combinations that could have happened in the game. We were looking at the analysis, courtesy of chess.com, about what we could have done. You know, my mistake was moving my knight to g7, and then he was winning at some cases in the middle game and equal in the middle game. And then the most crucial part was the queen sacrifice that could have happened on my behalf, and it didn't happen. At the end of the game, me and Peso discussed, analyzed, he left. I stood a little longer after the game just wondering what would have happened if I moved my rook instead of taking that pawn with my queen. Now, if you guys want to see more content like this in regards to more chess content, more chess stories, or more chess games on my behalf, or other players as well, please subscribe to this channel and follow us on Instagram at the Chicago Chess Club, where you can follow us and keep up to date about the events that we're hosting in the Chicagoland area. And if you find it within your heart, please donate to our Venmo at Official Chicago Chess Club to help us keep this page going, to keep the club going, and for us to continue to create content for you guys. And that is all. So we hope to see you in the next video. The Chicago Chess Club, signing out.